Hello, everybody. Welcome to the brand new show, Dungeons and Developer Insights, found only here on my channel, where I get the opportunity to talk to the wonderful people from Standing Stone Games and ask them cool questions about some new things that are coming out. So today, I am joined by Steve, as you know, as Steelstar on the DDO forums, and I am also joined by Quentin, who is known as Lynnabel on the DDO forums. Thanks for coming, guys.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about something super fun that I know the DDO community is very excited about, which is the Palemaster is being changed. Been around for a long time. It's kind of like a staple. I remember myself when I came back after a long break of Dungeons & Dragons. I took like a year break to focus on school, and when I came back, hey, my character was a Palemaster, and it's just great memories playing the whole thing. I'm sure you guys have some fond memories, and it must have been exciting to rework on a project like that.
Yeah. I mean, one of my first live characters was a Palemaster. Really liked the tree, and we're excited to be doing some cool stuff with it.
No, I played a Wraith Eldritch Knight Artificer monstrosity. It was not very good. I would not recommend it.
Well, what I wanted to ask you a couple questions today to kind of give them, the Dungeons & Dragons Online community, a little bit of insight as to how you guys do things when you do class reworks, and a little bit more about the Palemaster. Because the Palemaster tree is something that's been around for a long time, and it's super widely used. One of the most popular builds of all time is actually the Pale Trapper, which you can find on the DDO forums, and a lot of people like to play that build. So given that it's super familiar and almost everyone knows it, what sort of considerations do you guys make when doing adjustments to an enhancement tree that the players are already so familiar with?
One of the things we tried to set out to do when we started looking into Palemaster, one of the things that we noticed is that the tree is relatively powerful, which isn't always the case when we do a revamp like this. A lot of times the tree has fallen behind other trees just numerically or statistically. The Palemaster had done that in some ways, but not nearly as severely as others. The biggest problem we were looking at is that it was kind of clunky and frustrating to use in certain specific level ranges and in certain specific ways. So what we did in this approach is we rearranged a lot, added quite a bit, and tried to take away very little. So everything that was there, more or less, you can get. It just might not be in quite the same order.
One of the things that I know a lot of people get sort of upset about sometimes is when things change in their tree that they like. And I know that something that has changed in this tree is that the spell-like abilities that were available in the Palemaster tree, instead of costing health, which they did before, now cost spell points. The health cost was great because you could offset it by just having your aura running and being able to heal. But now you aren't able to do that. So what was kind of the thought process behind that decision, and what happened there?
Switching them over from health to spell points definitely made them less, I would say, pretty much free, but they now act a lot more like spells internally and therefore actually benefit from, for example, full spell power, from meta magics, them being spell-like abilities as a whole rather than things that are trying really hard to pretend to be spell-like abilities. One of the tough decisions that you have to make when you're revamping a tree is just how many of those weird corner cases you're going to dedicate a lot of effort to keeping forward, and in this case, the added benefit of using health is not really worth them just not being very good spells. There's an upper limit to how good that button could physically perform in DDO if it doesn't actually perform like a spell does. And moving it over to a spell, yes, it does not cost blood, and that's less, thematically evil, but they do actually do something now when you press the button, which I would say is a pretty marked improvement in other areas.
Yeah, they were significantly behind a lot of other similarly positioned SLAs, and we wanted to improve them significantly, adding meta magics, adding full scaling, adding the negative immunity bypass, and so we brought them closer to the overall meta of normal spells.
And I think that's honestly something that a lot of people hadn't really considered, is the fact that the spells didn't scale with metamagic feats, they didn't really scale as well with spell power, and now they're going to be fully scaling with all of those things, and they'll be very, very powerful. So if you're out there and you're unsure, make sure to look for those spells and really relying on them through the leveling process a lot more. Another change that you guys have made to the tree is making it so that instead of having access to all of the forms, you can have access to one or two if you happen to take an enhancement within the tree. And as such, some of the forms got a bit of a change and a bit of a rework. The most notable of which is that the new Lich form is no longer the Master of DCs that it used to be. So what was kind of some of the thought process behind that change, and how is it going to affect Palemaster going forward?
All right, so one of the things that we noticed when digging deep into Palemaster, kind of two related things. One of which was as you bought up the cores, you more or less had to take forms you didn't necessarily want to use. And the more we dug into it, very rarely did people ever really use more than 2. Zombie form was the first one you got, and if you weren't building for melee, and if you're building into a Palemaster, most of the time you're probably not doing that. You're kind of constrained into using this form that's maybe kind of okay for 3 levels from 3 to 6. And then the lower end forms, being just weaker, kind of get abandoned with the exception of a couple of specific use cases. And so the 2 things we kind of set out to do in this rearrange was make it so that you could get access to the form you wanted to play, and that no one form was the best at doing things that the Palemaster tree as a whole should be good at doing, which is, in a lot of cases, DC casting. We did de-emphasize DC casting out of Lich, because before, if you were trying to DC cast in Palemaster and not using Lich form, you were, quote-unquote, doing it wrong, because you were sacrificing DCs to play what you wanted to play.
Making it so that each of the 4 forms have their own defined roles, and you can just pick whichever form you'd like to specialize in, greatly frees up a lot of space and allows us to really take them in very interesting directions. And furthermore, swapping between 2 forms, we found that a lot of people, I mean, you can fall back to Wraith, but very few people used more than 2. And we thought that definitely we wanted to be able to keep the Shroud, and then you have a backup Shroud. If things go wrong, you can dive into Wraith or to Zombie, depending. But having 2 you can swap between kept a lot of the fun about switching between which undead there is, without forcing them to take up very valuable space in the cores to enforce some sort of progression.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be something that people will miss initially, but then they won't once they actually start playing the Palemaster.
But players should be able to play on Lamania with the updated Lich form in response to the first round of feedback on the first pass of the Lamania for Update 43.
Yes.
Following that, the forms have been a little bit edited, and as you just said, even some of them have been tweaked a little bit more coming out with the new Lamania that people will be able to see very shortly. The 4 forms, for those that are not familiar with Palemaster, Shroud of the Zombie, Vampire, Wraith, and Lich. Where do you guys see each of those forms having their own role? What are the strengths that you envision in each of those?
Zombie is easy because Zombie classically was always a little bit bulky and a little bit punchy. So what we tried to do with it was give you this sort of trade-off of attacking slower and zombie-like, which is kind of classically true of the form, combined with just doing 20% more damage on the whole. As you get into tier 5, making it bulkier. So it might combine well with going into some kind of martial multi-class or into Eldritch Knight.
Right now, there's a very popular tank multi-class build that leverages a lot of the defensive potential from Renegade Mastermaker, as well as the healing potential of being some sort of repairable character. It would be very interesting if an alternate build were to come up but use zombie form rather than being a robot as the backbone of their defensive potential. And I hope that zombie form lives up to the task.
Zombie is very interesting because there is the additional tankiness that you get from the zombie form. And
yes,
as a lot of people who have been paying attention to the endgame of DDO know right now, Artificer is in the spotlight where, for some reason, all of your tanks happen to be this non-tank class. And if the change is that wizards happen to now become part of this tank class where they're not really a tank class. There might be a situation in DDO where none of the tanks are alive. They're either robots or undead, and they're mostly wizards and artificers. So
yeah,
is that something that is just kind of a fun thing in the meantime while potentially other changes are coming for tanks in the future? Or is this kind of just DDO's going Wild Wild West on this, and we're not coming back?
It's really that first piece. We have a couple of things in mind for more of the traditional tank classes. You'll see some of those in this update, and probably some in the future if we land on specifically what we want to do. So we've been talking about it for sure.
I think it's kind of the beauty of DDO, though, is that no matter what we could do in order to push a pure tank class together in order to fit completely in the spotlight, the allure of a completely bizarre undead robot multi-class tank that somehow performs even better, that's a lot more fun, I think, from a metagame perspective of finding the perfect multi-class that you can tinker together and get up into just the right place that you want a character to be. And I feel like that's really what sets DDO apart from other games.
Yeah.
In that you're not, when you make a character, you're not picking a tank class and then getting up to the max level as a tank and then you play as a tank. You're making a cool robot zombie, and then that cool robot zombie also has fighter levels or something, and it all just kind of mixes together. And I think that we're never going to be able to think of a single creative thing that the players are going to, and we're consistently pleasantly surprised when players figure out something that is very exciting and that accomplishes exactly what they need.
Yeah. So the real answer is kind of both. We want those kind of weird multi-class builds to exist and to thrive, but we also don't want the kind of traditional D&D-ish sort of builds to be so far behind that they're not worth playing either.
Yeah, you shouldn't be penalized for not entertaining a weird multi-class, but if you did want to put into the extra effort and get your cool builds together, it shouldn't be, it should work at the very least.
Yeah. Vampire form also has a little bit of on-hit martial kind of thing, but also focuses into enchantment DCs a little bit. We see that working well, again, with Eldritch Knight, but also, say, like a Swashbuckler, which would be a little bit weird given your ability score layout, but there's some multi-class potential there to take advantage of the various different things that Vampire does.
Wraith beforehand was very, very, very defensively oriented, and you sacrificed a lot of your DC potential. But now that necromancy casting and DCs are relatively equalized across all of the forms, we're hoping Wraith ends up to be there's two different variants. The castery focus, in which you're sacrificing offensive potential from Lich in order to aim for incorporality as a defense, or as a very defensive melee, taking advantage of sneak attack dice and dodge in order to survive toe-to-toe. And then Lich as a Palemaster, able to use DCs and leverage MMR cap in order to surmount some of the classical weaknesses of a traditional caster, and to hopefully damage using negative spells and at higher levels transition over into a full DC caster.
The new Palemaster, it looks super strong, really self-sufficient, especially as like a pure class, and honestly, pure wizards never look better nowadays with the reworked Eldritch Knight, reworked Palemaster, and it's a huge improvement over its predecessor. How do you guys consider multi-classing when you're designing a tree, especially when it's something that changes the way in which you play by so much, like the Palemaster, changing your healing into negative?
It's always something we're considering when we're either making a new tree or reworking an existing tree. Low cores and things in tier 1 to 4, we have to consider, what a level 1 splash, 2 splash, 3 splash, and so on is going to do for somebody who comes in here. You're a little less likely to splash a few levels of wizard because the class features and spells aren't going to do a whole lot for you. But for Palemaster, a little bit more so. You're going to get with a 3-level splash, you're going to get access to one of those forms, the first 3 tiers of enhancements. So that's something we definitely kept an eye on, as well as what an 18 wizard with a 2 splash of something else might look like going into this, what you're trading off in terms of your spell casting in the last couple of cores versus what you could pull in. So it's definitely a consideration. DDO is such a broad game in terms of your multi-class potential that I'm sure there's builds we haven't considered. We've considered quite a few. We've got some weird ones that we've come up with using this Palemaster, but I'm sure our players will come up with even more we haven't thought of.
I definitely agree with you there. There's way too many builds to think of, and you can definitely count on the DDO community to come up with 50 million that have never even been thought of by anybody. A change that was actually made was that Palemasters are now going to get 50% healing from positive energy instead of 0 while in undead form. And while it definitely seems like it's something that would be easier for the gameplay, it doesn't feel quite as thematic. So what was your thought in changing that?
We went back and forth a lot on this one. One of the problems that we ran into with this tree is while they are definitely pretty survivable throughout all of Heroic, once you get into Epic, that's really not the case. Like Ravenloft content, Sharn content, on Elite, their self-healing doesn't hold up as well, and you don't tend to see a lot of Palemasters in top-end party grouping, in part because their survivability drops off so hard toward the end game. Decided to take a look at what would happen if we made the form more like Warforged, where that trade-off is half. Warforged can push those a little bit better with its racial tree. Palemaster can't really.
But Palemaster can turn its undead form off, whereas a
Exactly.
Warforged, you are a Warforged forever.
So it's a little bit more similar to Warforged than it was, but overall we feel like it's going to be very useful for party dynamics, especially toward the end game.
So stop me if you guys have heard this scenario before. You're playing with a Palemaster and things are not going so great in a party, and they're sitting there with their Lesser Death Aura on, waiting to self-heal back to full, and you find yourself typing out a tell to tell them that if they just turn their shroud off, you can hit them with a Cure Light Wounds and they're going to be back to full health. And that, as both the person trying desperately to get this person to understand that if they just turn their shroud off and back on again, they can be fine, it's not very fun for the Palemaster to have to take off part of your build for someone to actually interact with you in a party play. Saving someone's life with a heal across the room, that feels good. And limiting that completely, our feedback channels for, like, if you hit somebody with a heal that's a Palemaster, that just kind of goes nowhere, and it doesn't feel very good. And you end up, like, the risk of blowing a really clutch cooldown on someone who doesn't even get any of the benefits, it doesn't actually feel very fun, and it's not really worth the hit as far as flavor is concerned to keep that restriction in place.
I think this is going to be a really good change for a lot of players. I think it's going to make the overall leveling process a lot smoother, but it does make me think about the future and potential of negative energy with regards to healing each other in types of spells and other class features. Mostly it's just wizards, and then also the cleric inflict spells that are actually able to interact with negative energy. Is it possible that either other class features are going to be changed in other classes to help interact with negative energy? Ravenloft and some of the packs in between have had a lot of things that have given negative healing amp a huge prominent spotlight, and it's on, I swear, half of the gear that I find that's armor pieces just happen to have negative amp on it. Is there any plans to make anything else interact with Palemasters?
So there are probably places in the future where other sources of negative energy might pop up. But the thing of it is, unless you, as a cleric or a wizard or a sorcerer or whatever else we add it to, know ahead of time that you are frequently going to run with a Palemaster, people aren't necessarily going to prepare that just in case they happen to have one. And so it's one of those, we are trying to do our best to make Palemasters themselves very self-reliable, but the previous change we just talked about, the 50% from positive healing, is there to help bridge that gap. Possible that there might be other class features in the future that interact with negative in ways that can help Palemasters, but we aren't not trying to make it so that Palemasters can't survive without those things.
Yeah, making Palemasters be able to be more survivable in different situations seems to be a theme of this patch, especially because one of the effects in the Palemaster tree is the Unholy Avatar, which allows you to strip away the immunity from undead of their negative energy spells. Super powerful, gonna make it very easy for Palemasters to just get in there and just play like everybody else instead of running into problems in half of DDO's quests that happen to feature undead.
It really is close to, I think we ran numbers at some point, it is somewhere close to half of all DDO quests have undead in them. And yes, the Palemaster has a number of knobs like, Command Undead and things like that. Yeah. But that doesn't quite take the place of, I need to kill this undead to progress through the quest. So we wanted to make their general arsenal of spells more useful.
What we're trying to prevent is a scenario in which you just playing the game normally are presented with a scenario that makes you go, geez, and then you have to search through your character sheet or your spell book to go find a negative inflict spell that you may or may not have, or oh god, where did I put my undeath to death button because I gotta kill these 20 skeletons and all I have is Ghoul Touch.
It's not a fun scenario.
Some other classes, like Artificer and Cleric, specialize very heavily into a single damage type for their spell casting, but they don't have a immunity bypass. Is that something you guys are considering since Palemaster is getting this change?
It's something we're not going to get to it for this update in particular, but it's something that we've talked about potentially adding in a few other places, yeah.
I think if we add anything else to update 43, our QA team will actually kill us.
Yes, they will actually kill us.
They will, it's bad, it'll be bad.
This is a huge update.
I think this is going to be the single longest set of patch notes in a DDO update since Menace of the Underdark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Outside of some of the expansions, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big one, and we're very excited for you guys to see all these cool changes.
Yeah.
out of all of the things that you changed, what do you think was something that either took either the most effort or was one of the biggest things that you had to work on in the tree?
Getting the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cores was an experience. DDO is not set up to let you pick more than 8 options in like an enhancement tree. So Palemaster internally has a completely different structure to support the 11 options.
11, right?
11 options 3 times. So unlike other trees in which you have 6 core abilities that are numbered 1 through 6, Palemaster has 37 of them.
Yep.
38 of them, because it has no, it's less than that. It's 33 plus the other 3. There's 36 because
36,
they're the 33 groups of 3, 4, and 5, and then 1, 2, and 6, which are just totally normal.
That is still less than Archmage.
That is, yes. Archmage is 2 or 3 times the size of Palemaster, and Palemaster is the clear second place.
We're going to get to a pass on Archmage eventually. It won't be this year, but it is 2 to 3 times the size of every other tree, and so it's going to take us a bit. It's about finding the right kind of time.
But yes, to answer your question, the core abilities of Palemaster required a lot of special attention in order to get them to work. And to let you, when if you pick sneak attack dice in core 3, you can't pick it again in 4. That was a struggle.
Yeah. The rest I think was pretty straightforward overall.
Where did this idea come from? Instead of just going with like a lot of the other classes where you just get an upgrade or maybe an upgraded form. How did you land on this one?
So this was 2 different things coming together. One of which being because we put some of the forms at lower level, we had to take some things out of them so that they weren't just drastically overpowered at level 3, and the other being the fact that we wanted you to be able to make an undead the way you wanted to make it. So it essentially just turned into a build an undead workshop.
That's what I was going to say.
So we took a lot of the things that the forms gave you previously that we took out of the core forms and put them into those cores as options. So not only could you get them, the things you used to get in Lich form back, you also had access to them in other forms, but also added a couple of things you didn't previously have access to, and tried to make sure that, one person might have built with these 3 cores, but another might have built with these 3 cores, and that kind of changes how they specialize and what they're good at.
It also made planning for possible multi-class potential pretty fun.
Yeah.
Because there's a variety of different ways. Like if you're splashing Palemaster because you would like to play a melee vampire, a melee wraith, are you looking for more incorporeal percentage? Are you building with Sign of the Ethereal in mind and therefore would like the extra hide and move silently?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways the cores can shake out depending on your multi-class.
Yeah, and a 6 wizard splash gets you the forms and one of those things at the very least, so you can start trying to, like with the 6 wizard splash and then 14 something else, you can build a pretty solid sort of build that pulls in some of those really good cores while also keeping your primary class, whatever you're coming into.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll wrap this up here. So thank you for taking the time to join me. For those of you that are excited about Palemaster, you're going to catch it in Update 43. And if you haven't had the chance to learn about it or see any of the notes, I'll put a link down below to both the video where I reviewed and explained the entire thing in detail, as well as the most up-to-date version of the notes. So with that, thank you everybody for watching, and see you next time on Dungeons and Developer Insights. Working title.
Bye.
The working title.